All right. It's way past your Bertotime. This is Umberto again, and this is episode I don't even know. Like it could be the 100th episode, it could be the 1,000th episode. But the main thing is that we are together again. And today I want to talk about a new topic. Yesterday we talked about dreams, and today I want to talk about fears. Fears is another interesting word. Fear. Fear. Something scary. Makes us afraid. But fear goes back how long? Like till the beginning. The universe that we know is not a very welcoming place for life. Let's just say, like life as we know it, life like we have. It is welcoming in the grand scheme of things because we're here, but it's, we don't survive easily. We don't survive other than very, very narrow parameters. Most life has these problems, right? We're in fact one of the more resilient life forms we've had on the planet. We haven't been around for the longest, but we've survived a lot of different things. And we probably through technology could survive a lot of other things. Like right now we're sort of surviving a pandemic better than a lot of people survived a similar pandemic in the past, right? And we, but still, there's a lot of things that can kill us. There's a lot of things that can get to us. And this has been true since the beginning. Animals, fear, and that fear helps them survive. So that fear is just like these inherent little wires, connections in their brains, their nervous systems, their body mechanics, where certain stimuli make them like react at what we call with fear, and that makes them flee or like hide or get out of the way of that danger. And that's been an invaluable tool throughout evolution. At a different level, you could say, well, since fear is really just a reaction to an input, you could say like, well, physics has built in things that one could label fear, but certainly it doesn't fit our criteria normally. But I was thinking about this the other day, like magnets. Magnets, if you have a negative and a positive, they attract each other. When you have a negative and a negative, they repel each other. And so when that little magnet senses the other magnet and they're the same charge, this one feels fear. Now I know it doesn't feel, it doesn't do anything. There's not even a logical process there. It's literally just a physical process, right? It's a physical reaction to that input. But at the end of the day, the same thing's happening for us, just layers upon layers of metaphor, right? We are walking, and all of a sudden we see a shadow. And what happens is our conscious brain doesn't even register as quickly as older parts of our brain register some movement. And they register some movement because through evolution, basically certain patterns of photons being detected by the retina then get interpreted in a certain part of the older brain by saying, oh, those movements, better watch out for that. Because why? Well, because, some ancestors, not human ancestors, like animal ancestors, millions and millions of years ago, survived better when they reacted a certain way to certain optical stimuli, to certain light stimulus, right? So whenever certain types of movement were detected by those organisms and they moved quicker, they maybe fled quicker, they tended to survive more. So they passed their genes more, and then it built like an avalanche, right? And then now we are here and we're walking down the street, and then all of a sudden, boom, something happens. And before we know it, there's a little bit instinctual response of fear. It could still be useful too, because like if it is late at night, you actually might want to pay attention to what that is. So that's what's going on. But humans are we're no longer, at least most of us, we're no longer, hiding in a bush somewhere waiting to see if that was a tiger. we have a lot more complexity to our dynamics day to day. So if you're walking down the hallway of your business, your corporate building that you work in, towards your cubicle, and you see a shadow, you probably don't need to go and hide. Maybe you do, because it could be your boss. He's going to ask you for the TPS reports and stuff like that. So I can understand that. And that actually does create real fear in many people. That anxiety of like, oh shoot, I haven't done those TPS reports, right? But let's say that's not the case. It turns out it was just Bob, your friend at work. He was walking by. And yet you might still get that same instinctual response. Not your conscious brain so much, right? It's not like you go, oh gosh, could that be a tiger? No, but your inner older animal does. So you're like, oh, what's that? And this causes a little bit of stress in your body. And then, these stresses accumulate. And there's little pieces of fear all day long. We just talked about one from your boss. Same thing. You're sitting there working. An email comes in. And you have the little dings set because you haven't turned them off. So ding. Oh gosh. An email, or maybe it was an instant chat. Someone's asking you a question. Guess what? You probably got a fear response. Because for one thing, for, I don't know, all of billions of years, no animal had these little electronic ding noises to react to. So if you're sitting there picking berries or, slowly cutting a little animal you hunted and you hear a bing, like you don't want to stick around for that. So that's going to cause a little fear response in you. Especially then, again, the metaphors mount because it's not just that the ding sounds like something you're not that used to physically. Because by then, your brain has conditioned a bit and stuff like that. But it's actually what it means now. As a human, you're in an office environment. You know that someone's asking for something. And it's immediately shifting you off of whatever you were focusing on. And whatever they're asking for is probably going to require you to have to do work, expend energy. And so there's all these other processes you don't have that much energy to expend because you don't know when the next piece of berry or fish you're going to be able to eat. Nowadays, that's not true, but your body still has all these built-in mechanisms that are ancient and somewhat outdated for your modern life, but still there you are. It's like, dang, oh gosh, need to expend random resources on something I wasn't planning. This is unexpected. So your brain issues some alerts. And then these things keep happening. I don't know if you've encountered this. I certainly have. I turn off all these little buzzers and rings on my devices because if I don't, I'm afraid constantly. Ding, dong, ding, dong. Who is that? Funny story, when I was growing up in my mom's house, as a teenager, I was 15, 16. And I had a younger brother. Still have a younger brother. He'll always be my younger brother. And we would sit there and we'd be doing whatever. Probably nothing that bad. We were probably just not doing our homework. We're watching a show because mom went to the grocery store. Maybe she went to the bank. Maybe it was a weekend. We were supposed to be cleaning up the room. We're delaying it a little bit. So we're playing a video game or we're playing some game. Maybe we're playing the game where we're, pretending to be movie stars fighting each other. We would do the thing where it's like, okay, I'll be Bruce Willis from Die Hard and you'll be Schwarzenegger from Commando. And then we'll see, what are their strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. I'll talk more about that in another episode. But basically, we're sitting there and all of a sudden, the garage door starts opening. Now, mind you, this was an old garage door. They finally did replace it. But at the time, it was loud. You could be anywhere in the house. You would hear it. It was like, oh gosh. Years later, as an adult, in my late 30s, I would be at my mom's house. Whenever I would hear that garage door sound before they updated it, I'd still have this tremendous fear response. And we did. And both my brother and I would be like, oh gosh, mom is home. Nothing, it was never that bad. It was just oh, you kids didn't clean up or whatever. But man, we would respond with intense fear in that moment. And it's incredible how much that conditioned me. Oh. So, yeah. So I associate that a lot with these dings and noises from email alerts and notifications. That's why I'm always no, don't notify me. I don't want to be notified. Another funny story. So my friend Kirk thought it was insane that I essentially disabled my ringer on my phone. I just don't let it ring. Because I start getting so many telemarketing calls. I'm sure you've experienced this too. There were, especially a couple last few years, it just escalated and escalated. And this is before the carriers and whatnot. They put in some help for us, and then iOS, like the phone makers did as well, so that we could like pre-filter some of these things. But man, I just got tired of seeing all these numbers I don't know. And frankly, who calls me on the phone anymore? Like, no one calls me on the phone. If I'm going to get a phone call, it's like a dire emergency, maybe. But no one calls me on the phone. I mean, some people do, like the barber place or the orthodontist. Hey, you missed your appointment for the 10th time. Those kinds of things. But normally I don't get phone calls. So I'm like, yeah, I don't need this. I'm just going to turn off the ringer altogether. My friend Kirk was like, you're insane. You'll miss important calls. I'm like, no, I'm not going to miss important calls. Like, if they were that important, they'll find a modern way to contact me. Like, if they know me, they can come find me, or can send me a text message. I'll check the text message. And by the way, they can leave a message. I'll check voicemail every now and then. So while this is happening, I'm also complaining to him that I have an amp. So I have this beautiful amp that is back here. I can maybe uncover it for you. It's this beautiful guitar amp. It's a Mesa Boogie Lone Star Special that I bought years ago, and it's just beautiful. It's got this like awesome leather. Not that I know any animals with red leather on their skin, but it looks like it's alligator skin, and it's just beautiful. It sounds amazing, but unfortunately, it stopped working a few years ago. And I tried to get it fixed. I took it to a couple places. They said they fixed it, and then it wasn't fixed. Spent a whole bunch of money. I definitely didn't want to get rid of it. And so I didn't know what to do. Finally, I found a place, an amazing place, Aviator Audio here in Washington. And they were able to fix it. But that's a spoiler alert, because what happened was I sent it to get fixed at this place. And they told me it would take a few months because they were like backed up. And this is like 2 years ago or something, or a year and a half maybe. And then October rolled around. I took it in September. October rolled around. I'm like, yeah, fine. Of course, I wouldn't hear anything yet. December rolled around. Didn't hear. New Year started, and I kept thinking, man, why haven't I heard back? And then months went by, and I was like busy, and I didn't like really check in, and so I didn't have my amp. And then one day I'm like, I should check in on my amp. But by then, I had forgotten where it is that I took it, because I actually took it somewhere else, and that place shipped it to this other place. And I couldn't find the stupid record or anything. I'm like, oh no, like I might have lost my amp. So I was telling this to that same friend, and he's like, wow, that sucks. Can't you contact them or what? Like, I don't know who to contact. Like, I literally called a whole bunch of companies in the area that seemed like none of them had a record of me or anything. Okay, so two things. Finally, I thought, well, wait a minute. Why can't I just go to the place I dropped it off? They must know where the hell they sent it, which I did. I know, idiotic, but I was like busy with a whole bunch of other stuff. So I went there, and sure enough, they're like, well, yeah, it's Aviator Audio, and I give them a call. This is like a year later, maybe. And the guy's like, hello. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, this blah, 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 this amp. Like, you're the dude. I'm like, oh, yeah, so you have it? It's like, of course we have it. We were trying to get a hold of you forever. We kept leaving you voicemails. Oh, man. So, yeah, I guess he was right. But if I had to do it over, I probably would still not turn that stupid ringer on. I would just probably write down where the hell I sent my amp to and check in on it. So, yeah. But anyways, that's the thing. These little things make me afraid. It makes all of us afraid. And fear causes stress. And stress is really unhealthy. Stress makes us overeat, undersleep, and it makes us grow cancers, tumors, all these things. It's not bueno. Muy malo. So I don't recommend stress. And therefore, I don't recommend fear. But our modern life is full of fear. So news like this with the coronavirus, like, come on. Like, this is like a fear factory, right? Not that there's anything we can do. I mean, like, the virus is here. It's a problem. But it is a fear factory. So you watch the news or you see the headlines, and it's traumatic. And then you'll watch some of our quote unquote leaders speak about it. It's traumatic. It's fearful. So that's a problem. Social media can make us afraid too, right? Like I have this problem. I'll scroll through Facebook and there's a lot of fear. I actually just saw also some studies that showed that actually Facebook did. It showed this interesting thing where when you're looking at social posts, people will go through this little triangle where if they are just browsing, they'll start feeling like that fear of missing out slash social anxiety because they're like, oh man, all these people's lives look so much better than mine. And so then they get sort of like fearful of that. And then if they post, it's like a different thing. Like they want to see if people liked it. What did they say? And it's like a different kind of fear. Like, am I going to be rejected by my human society? Am I going to be relegated outside of the tribe, kicked out, left to die? So these are other fear generators. And of course, there's health concerns. Forget the coronavirus, just in general, I suffer from like health anxiety, So that causes a lot of fear. Like, oh my God, my elbow's hurting. Wonder what that, oh, in fact, my shoulder just popped. So like that could be serious. That causes a lot of fear. More inflammation, which leads to more health problems. It's a vicious circle for sure. Relationships cause fear. You're talking with your significant other, and it's like, things can escalate, or you can be afraid that they're not going to love you, or you're going to be afraid that they're judging you, or you're afraid, fear. Friendships too. Like you can have fear from your friendships, from your family. Oh my gosh, family can be a huge source of fear. Like I have all these crazy sources of fear from my family because when I was little, my mom and my dad split up, and I didn't get to see my mom very often. So I stayed with my dad, and then I stayed in Colombia with my relatives in Colombia. And actually, imagine how much like fear I have from that. Like, oh my gosh, are people gonna abandon me? Am I not gonna have people? And this has caused all sorts of issues for me. Things like unhealthy behaviors with friends and relationships and things out of fear. So yeah, so relationships, parents, family, significant others. School. We talked about professional life. School can be super fearful, fear-inducing, super stressful. I cannot tell you how afraid I was of like missing answers on tests, not turning in homework. Oh my gosh, I agonized so much so that years, like a decade or more after I was done with college, I would still have these sweaty nightmares where in my nightmare, I had forgotten that I was still enrolled in classes at my University of Washington. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't been attending for months. And like this realization, oh my gosh, I can't tell you. It was so fear-inducing. Then I'd wake up in a panic thinking, am I really like that behind? Just like think about like the tests you've missed, the assignments you've missed. How are you going to recover from that? So yeah, school can be a huge source of fear. And then there's other daily things that can happen. You're driving, man. Driving can be a huge source of fear. Someone cuts you off, honks. Someone honks at you. Someone looked at you funny. Someone tried to pass you. Policemen, even if you're doing nothing wrong, you see a police, they don't even have to have their sirens on. You see a police car go by, that's a fear response right there. Same thing with fire trucks, all these things, right? Watching TV, not just news, watching TV. Now, with all of this, what's funny is animals benefit from certain levels of stress that is manageable that then they can overcome. But that's like what exercise is. That's what calorie deprivation or, intermittent fasting is. So some of that can actually, but is it true with exposure to media? There's a lot of different research on this, but think about it, right? So you're sitting there at night and you're watching your cop show or your action show, and the good guys are in danger. And that's a fear response. But it's a different kind of fear response, especially as you're an adult. The younger you are, you actually can't distinguish very easily between fiction and nonfiction. So you might have a real biological, visceral fear response. As an adult, it's a little harder. That's why horror movies start getting less and less effective for a lot of people, not everyone. So yeah, there's tons of sources of fear. What I think is important, this is something I do, and it's not something I always knew, but something I've developed over the years. First of all, is I have conversations with myself when I feel afraid. And I didn't always know to recognize things as being afraid. Because like if you had asked me for a long time, most of my life, I would have said, no, I'm not afraid of that or this. But you are. I am afraid of these things. So I'll have a little conversation like, okay, you're reacting with fear. It makes sense. You're about to perform on this stage. There's a lot of people here. Some of you don't even know a lot of these people. You maybe didn't practice that song enough. So it makes sense. You're afraid. But you've been in these situations before. Or you've had worse situations before. Or it doesn't really matter that much. Like these kinds of conversations. It's not 100% effective, but it is somewhat effective. And the more I have the conversations, the better I get at having the conversations. That's one thing. The second thing is breathing. You've probably seen, maybe you've seen like how some of the Navy SEALs have this breathing technique. I always used to think right before performing, right before a swimming meet, right before something stressful, that I should slow my breathing down and really not, just like calm. Turns out that's not the best approach. Turns out you need to amp yourself up a bit, get oxygen inside your body. Didn't know that. So now the thing I do is deep breaths. Now you don't want to over oxygenate and like pass out or something, right? It's just like you want to get some bursts of deep breathing into your body, get some oxygen into your body, and pump yourself up. Just instead of like calm yourself down. Because when you like tell yourself calm yourself down, it's like, oh God, I'm not calming down. Here we go. We're gonna do this. Whew, I can totally do this. Tony Robbins, right? Like, I'm gonna kill this, right? Whatever. So that kind of style is actually something I've developed more and more over these last few years to help me overcome the fear. So number one, talking to myself. Number two, deep breathing and pumping myself up. And number three, jumping into it. Jumping into it. It's kind of like when you want to dive off a very high diving board or jump off a cliff into the water or go into cold water. A lot of water here. And actually that makes sense, right? Water can drown us. There's a lot, and humans don't know how to swim normally, right? You got to learn how to swim. Makes sense that water and fire and these things would result in innate fears. But essentially, if you're about to do something and you're like a little hesitant, the more you think about it, the more you agonize, it's going to be harder and harder. But assuming it's nothing too reckless or anything, if you just go, I'm doing this and just do it, it's so much easier. And so I tend to do that. Like I've been doing cold showers for a while now. Not the whole shower. Maybe I'm not that ready yet, but I'll do, in fact, I mix. What I do is I'll do hot water for a bit, get kind of like that sauna kind of thing going. It's not as good as a sauna, and then towards the last few minutes, I'll turn full cold water. And at first it was really hard. I had to like ease myself into it. And that was actually made it harder. Because then I would be like turning it up a little bit and then it would get so cold. And I'm like, I started doing the Wim Hof method. If you have heard of it or look it up. But it's like take those deep breaths and just dive right in. And just do it. Don't recommend it if you have heart conditions, if you're older, if you have high blood pressure. Like don't do this on my say. But I'm just saying that's what I do. And it's easier. I just do it. And once I'm doing it, like, okay, now I'm doing this thing. I'll just take some deep breaths. I'm not panicking as much. So those are the three things. Number one, have those little conversations with myself. Number two, deep breaths and pumping myself up. And number three, just go into it. So hopefully that is helpful. Love to hear what you're afraid of, how you deal with fear. Leave comments, leave likes, subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you again.